Hi, thanks for joining us for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. I'm Chris Cooper. It's Halloween, and we're going to talk about bats and unwanted winter house guests that go bump in the night. That's just ahead on the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South.
Production funding for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South is provided by Goodwin's Landscape and Garden Center in Germantown since 1943 and continuing to offer its plants for successful gardening with 7 greenhouses and 3 acres of plants, plus comprehensive landscape services. International Paper Foundation, the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the Family Plot. I'm Chris Cooper. Joining me today is Andy Williams. Andy is the manager at Lichterman Nature Center, and Mr. D is with us today.
Hello.
Thanks for joining me.
Glad to be here.
This is going to be fun because we're talking about Halloween, okay? And you can't talk about Halloween without talking about bats.
Yeah,
so, Andy, you're going to be Batman for us today, right?
I wanted to be. I wanted to be. I still watch all the Batman movies and that sort of stuff.
So do I.
But the only thing more interesting than Batman are real bats.
Okay, all right.
But the strangest thing, though, most people don't know a lot about bats. Sure. And they're all around us. Worldwide, they're the second most numerous species of mammal. And just for clarity, some people, is it a bird, is it a mammal, what is a bat? Well, bat is a mammal, meaning it's got fur, it bears young live, they nurse their young, they exercise in parental care.
Wow.
But 1,100 species worldwide is pretty impressive.
That's a lot.
It is.
1,100.
In the United States, there are about 44, 45 different species of bat. And here in the Mid-South alone, there are 19 species of bat. But people rarely ever see them because, you know, they're good little hiders and all like that. But going back to the worldwide bats, I brought some cutouts that give you an idea of the diversity of bats. They are just all over the place. This is a representation of a flying fox. These are found mainly in the South Pacific, and they eat fruit.
Okay.
They use, I believe, some echolocation, but if you see their face, they're really kind of cute. You can see why they call them flying foxes. But they can be agricultural pests, but they do fly in groups and colonies. And I've been in Australia, seen them flying overhead, and seen them going out right after dusk. It's pretty impressive to see that much darkness in the sky.
Yeah, that's a pretty impressive size.
That's a lot worse than a stink bug.
Yeah, oh,
Yes,
exactly.
it is.
And with the 2-3 pound body, you can imagine how much fruit it takes to keep that going. Just for way of comparison, this is the largest bat in the United States.
Okay.
They're found it's a massive bat. It's found mainly in Florida, southern states. Okay. For whatever reason, bats are most numerous in the tropics, and people who study bats for a living, they all want to go to the tropics as you get, fruit bats, and we'll also talk a little bit about vampire bats, and it's a Halloween treat. But a more typical size for our bats along in this range, the smallest bats, the microbats, they weigh as little as like an ounce, like the weight of a dime. I mean, it's a really strong diversity in sizes. I've got some mounts at various places of typical Mid-South bats to give you an idea of, generally what they look like and these are the bats that you may occasionally find on the ground or circling a street light looking for bugs. Okay. One misconception about bats is they're just mice with wings, and I can see how people may come up with that until you look closer. Actually, as far as classification, they're close related to primates. That has to do with the reproductive bits, and since it's a family show, I'll let people Google that if they need confirmation of that. This is a kind of a species or a bat-specific thing, but they have a different reproductive strategy. They typically have 1 pup a year. So you can imagine, well, mice, as you know, have several batches of young every year, and they have, their reproductive strategy is sheer numbers. Okay. Where it's bats, it's parental care. The young are actually breech delivery in most cases, which is kind of interesting. I guess if you hang upside down, though, that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I would think so.
But you can see if you have 1 young a year and that sort of stuff, how if you it'd take a lot longer for a colony of bats to recover than mice in your house. Okay. Because it takes them so long. Their life cycle, most of the bats around here anyway, hibernate. And so basically, this time of year, they mate right before they hibernate.
Okay.
They find a nice place to hibernate, which may or may not be nearby. Some of them fly up to 300 miles to find a place to hibernate.
Okay.
They hibernate for the winter. They're just on a food feeding frenzy right now, and they barely have enough energy to last the winter. And so if they break their hibernation during the middle of the winter, there are no bugs to eat and that sort of stuff, and they can starve to death during hibernation. And so they try to find places that are remote, they're unlikely to be disturbed, and have constant temperature. When they emerge from hibernations, the females then ovulate, or somehow they actually become pregnant when food starts becoming abundant. The males go off and play cards or whatever they do, but the females tend to get together and they congregate in separate maternity colonies. They, most of the bat colonies during the feeding season tend to be females. They're nursing young, and they actually have little nurseries inside the maternity colonies when they go fly looking for food.
Wow, how about that?
And so that's something to keep in mind. A lot of people in the South, and it's a really good idea to get into bat houses. But before we get to the bat houses, I did 2 more myths. One, they say blind as a bat.
Yeah, I've heard that, of course.
Yeah, but that's an urban myth. Actually, lots of them have great eyesight, and particularly the flying foxes use not only their eyesight, but their sense of smell to find food. But bats, particularly at night, rely a whole lot on a process called echolocation. They emit high-frequency sounds, ultrasounds, and by definition, ultrasounds, we can't hear them.
Right.
But they, of course, they have some squawks in the nursery. They have vocalizations for communication, but they find their way around by putting out a continuous stream of ultrasound, and they look for patterns of sound to determine what's going on around them. The closest human thing, I don't know if you've passed on the interstate by truck, where you go over a bridge and you can feel the vibrations from the strut. It's sort of like that, but on a much literally higher scale.
About that. Okay.
So, anyhow,
let's talk about the bat house. We have a little time left.
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
well, the
definitely
bat houses, this one is, I got it because it's the fanciest one I've ever seen. It may or may not be big enough, but and the bats really don't like to be disturbed, but this opens up and you can see it's got grooves for them to hang upside down. All their toes are identical, and they're well adapted for life hanging upside down. For a bat house to be successful, it's got to be at least 10 feet off the ground, because they, in order to fly, they can't really jump up and fly. They drop, and then their wings catch the air, and they fly off.
Okay.
Also, having it 10 to 12 feet off the ground, inconvenient for us, but it's also inconvenient for predators. The successful bat house needs to be in about 7 full hours of sun. They like it hot.
Oh, wow.
And they like to be within a quarter mile of water. Like it could be of course, lake, stream, pond, but an outdoor water feature. They need the water both for, the water itself, but also for all the bugs. All the local bats in this area are insectivores, and apparently important insectivores. They can eat half their weight in insects every night. And they actually eat mosquitoes. Purple martins and some other things get credit for eating mosquitoes.
But bats.
But bats actually do, and they eat a whole lot of them.
Thank you, bats.
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
How about that? Okay. Wow. Now, can we talk briefly about the wings, though, how they fly?
Yeah, how do they fly? Well, I brought a poster that I think is very helpful. If you hold our hand up, you can see you got your thumb at the top. Bird wings are at the bottom are slightly different. You can see that they have modified arm and their hands down here. But the bats, their scientific name, Chiroptera, means hand wing. And so they actually have folds of skin that stretch in between each one of their finger bones. And this is their thumb at the top. They can use the thumb for getting around the ground and that sort of stuff. But they actually fly. They drop, they catch the air, and they're very, they fly really well. You see them flying in almost random patterns. What a lot of people don't really realize is that they also have, our local bats have membranes in between their hind legs, and tail. And when they're flying around looking kind of crazy, they're actually scooping insects into their tail, and then they reach down with their mouth to get the insects and all. And so what looks like erratic flight is, if you're going to catch, 500, 1,000, however, mosquitoes, you've got to be pretty agile
right.
and to scoop them all in. They're also, they eat a lot of moths and other nocturnal insects, and so they're very, very important to protecting our agricultural crops.
Didn't know that, so we need to give bats a lot more credit than we normally would. Thank you, Andy. We appreciate that.
Very
Good
welcome.
information about bats. There are a number of gardening events going on in the next couple of weeks here are just a few that might interest you. All right, Mr. D, you got to keep those pests out, right? Those things that go bump in the night, right?
That's right. We got to keep bats out of the belfry. Keep bats out of the belfry. They make all sorts of noise up there. During the wintertime or in the fall, as the temperatures start to get a little cooler, critters like to find a warm place, and they will come into your home if you relax and let them. And that's insects and mammals like mice and rats and things like that. And I've got some suggestions.
Okay.
The best thing to do is to keep them from coming in. If they come in, then you got to do things like kill them and or remove them, and you'd prefer not to have to go to that level. But the National Pest Management Association has put out some tips that you can follow that I ran across this last night, and some really, really good tips that you can use. And a lot of them are common sense. For example, sealing cracks and holes on the outside of your home. Walk around your house and take a good hard look at it, and look at it as if you're a mouse. And keep in mind that mice and rats have the ability to move the bones in their head, and they can get through extremely small holes. A mouse can get through a 1/4 inch crack.
Wow, that's small.
And a rat can get through a 1/2 inch crack. And they can do that because they can actually reduce the size of their heads. But seal those 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch cracks on the outside of your home. Pay special attention to where pipes and wires, utilities, gas lines and things like that enter your home. And if you have loose mortar or weather stripping that's fallen off or needs repair, do that. Now's a good time to do that. Firewood, if you have a fireplace, or even if a lot of folks that don't have fireplaces have fire pits, and they tend to store firewood, but make sure it's a pretty good distance from your home, at least 20 or 30 feet away from your home, because a lot of critters will take up residence in a wood pile.
Yeah.
Even if it's stacked neatly, they'll take up residence in the wood pile. If it's not stacked neatly, they will really, really take up residence in your wood pile. Storage areas, keep them well organized. Rats and mice really like clutter in under your house and in your attic and in places like that. If you keep things off the floor, with air spaces under them and stacked neatly, you're less likely to attract critters like that. You want to make sure that you eliminate any excessive moisture sites. If you have a stopped up gutter where water continually drips and there's moisture, that tends to attract insects. Can also attract termites, but it also attracts other critters because they tend to like moisture. If you have holes, you can cover them with hardware cloth. I would use at least a 1/4 inch or smaller hardware cloth. Now, I said a mouse could go through a 1/4 inch crack. It can't go through a 1/4 inch hardware cloth.
Okay.
Because a 1/4 inch crack, they can elongate their head, and so if you use a 1/4 inch hardware cloth, that should keep mice out. They won't chew on steel wool. If you have holes around a pipe, you can shove steel wool in there, or caulk. And they'll do some chewing on caulk, but steel wool and caulk, and then if you have to replace the caulk, you can do that. Wow. But keep your, as I mentioned, moisture can attract critters, so make sure that your attics and your basements and crawl spaces are well ventilated. Even in the wintertime, you need to provide some ventilation under your house. And if you fail at that,
that's going to be my next question.
Inside your house, and you probably need to do this anyway. I'm a strong believer in glue boards because that's a good identifier of a problem, because you'll catch the critters when they come in. So have you some glue boards. If you don't catch anything on them, it worked.
Where are some good places to put the glue boards, you think?
I'd scatter. I'd put them, of course, next to the baseboard of your walls, but fairly close to your entrances and your garage. I have glue boards on both sides of my garage door. So if they come in around the corner of the garage, and I'll catch them before they get very far. But just in your attic, every 20 or 30 feet, just and then don't worry about them. They'll last a long, long time unless you have a lot of critters. And if you have a lot of critters, then you can catch a lot of them. Right. But that should help you out if you have insects that come in cockroaches and things like that. And so there are types of cockroaches that live outside. The American cockroach is a big cockroach that lives outside typically, and they will come inside in the wintertime. If you have that, then you need to treat with pesticides. And we have a whole list of those available that will help take care of that.
I know you're.
I'm not going to say anything about spiders.
I was going to mention that. Yeah, spiders.
That gets into whole other territory. One thing that comes to mind, sometimes raccoons and squirrels get into your house.
Yeah.
And I just want to point out that the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency keeps a list online of people who are certified to take care of that problem. Although, the soft side of us wants to relocate the animal. That really solves the problem. If one got in, find a way to get in, others will follow it. And also relocating it just puts it into into an unfamiliar situation. It's almost cruel. And that it just moves the problem around and doesn't solve the problem you have at home.
Yeah, the problem is probably that we have an overpopulation of some of those critters, and they probably need to be population needs to be reduced somewhat. But I know we caught one out at Agri Center last week. One of the guys out there caught one in a trap. And I said, well, what did you use for bait? He didn't use anything for bait. It wasn't a real smart raccoon. I mean, he just went, he opened the trap, had the trap set with no bait in it, and the raccoon goes wandering in and got caught. And I said, what are you going to do with it? And he said, I'll just take it down here and turn it loose. I said, well, he'll probably beat you back here. Right. But it's kind of funny. I think, they're a problem at Agri Center in the research plots. And I had heard that some of the companies who catch these critters in the wintertime will take them out to Shelby Farms and release them.
Oh, wow.
Well, that's Agri Center. And,
it sure is.
That can create problems.
Yeah.
And this particular guy that caught this one said, actually, in the wintertime, he does that part-time. And I said, what do you do with them in the wintertime? I'll bring them out here and turn them loose. And, man.
And just, turn them loose out there, food plots and everything else. How about that?
If you want to release them, take them at least 100 miles away. How about that? out in the rural area or something like that. But even then, it's pretty cruel to that critter because he's going to be competing against a country critter that knows.
He won't know his way around.
He won't be able to survive.
And meanwhile, that'll just clear the pathway for one of his friends to move back into your house.
That's right.
Wow, about that.
Right.
All right. Well, we appreciate that discussion. Thanks, Mr. D. All right, here's our Q&A session, and Andy, you help us out, okay? All right, here's our first viewer email. I have dwarf citrus trees, and the leaves are turning white with black and yellow spots. It's 3 years old, and this is the first year it set fruit. I sprayed for bugs and fertilized it, including iron. The only bugs it had on it were white flies and a white hopper. What is wrong with my citrus trees? I don't know what I can do. And this is from Andrew. What do you think about that one, Mr. D?
Do you grow citrus?
We don't. They're not native, but not knowing anymore.
Well, you're Andrew. I'm thinking.
Oh no, yeah. It's not, I'm not very good at being sneaky.
Yeah.
But I'm assuming in the South though he would be growing it in a pot. And so my first question.
A greenhouse or something like that. Of course, this guy could be from Florida. It didn't say where he's from.
Yeah, it doesn't say. And, But I was thinking pot, first of all, going in a pot.
So I would check his growing conditions, make sure he doesn't have root rot or something that's from being in the container too long. Online, though, there's so many things that can attack citrus.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing that, if the spots on the leaves.
Yeah, the black and yellow spots.
There's a citrus canker disease that
has a little
might
yellow.
very well be the problem.
Okay, could be.
And unfortunately, it's a bacterial disease. So that's right. That's a citrus canker is a bacterial disease, and it's not easy to control.
No, it's not.
So you might want to look at resistant varieties. There should be some resistance to that. And I don't know whether this is a lemon or or
Yeah,
any-
we're guessing about a lot of things.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah,
a lot we don't know.
If they called Nature Center, of course, say, "Oh, we don't grow those," but I would direct them your way to the
Yeah,
county
yeah,
extension
yeah,
agent.
yeah.
But I checked out the website is Save Our Citrus, and that is the only thing that looked at all like
Like that.
and there's a number of problems that occur on citrus and nutrient deficiencies, and there's citrus greening disease out there that's real common
Right.
down in the Florida area, scab and things like that. But that is the only one that looked at all like
What he described. Okay. All right, Mr. Andrew, there you have it. Here's our next question. I know fall is the best time to plant trees and shrubs, but what about fruit trees? So we always say you can plant your ornamental trees and shrubs, but we never say when is the correct time to plant a fruit tree.
I do. I always say the best time to plant
Mr.
fruit
D
trees.
always says it though.
Mid-February to mid-March. Late winter is the best time to plant fruit trees.
Late winter.
Late winter, mid-February to mid-March. I'm looking at a fruit tree management timetable by Dr. David Lockwood out of UT.
He's good.
And very clear, planting, we're talking about bare root fruit trees.
Yeah.
Which is commercially, that's what the commercial guys buy. They buy large numbers, 2-year-old plants usually. And that's the best time to plant them. Even if they're in pots, that's the best time to plant them.
They
So,
want to
I don't know what it is about fruit trees. I do know that it would be worse to plant late than in the fall.
Yeah.
And I've seen cases where farmers would plant in early March and then wait until May. They got behind and they waited till May, and the May planted ones were really struggled. They had more diseases and more had bacterial spot, and they were just stressed, and they just really drug, and it really hurt that planting.
Sure.
For a long
May is
time.
late. All right, so our next question is this. So it's now the best time to plant strawberries for next year.
It depends on whether or not you're going with, as our commercial growers go, they have annual hill. They plant strawberries, treat them as if they're an annual crop.
Okay.
And if you do that, the fall now is the time to plant. That's when our commercial growers are planting. They're planning on getting 1 year's production out of the strawberries.
Like Mr. Jones is already planting
Mr.
his
Jones,
strawberries. 'Cause
right.
I've seen
Well, October 15th, so they're probably
Yeah,
already out
they're
there.
already out.
Already out there. If you're going to go with a more traditional way of growing strawberries, where they are a perennial crop, and you're going to grow them over the several years, try to get several years production out of them, and that's a matted row system, then you wait till the springtime and plant them. Okay. If you do that, you've got to make sure that after you have a crop, you renovate. You go in the summertime when they kind of go dormant, and you take out the plants that bore a lot, and you leave the daughter plants, because a plant that bore a heavy crop this year is not going to do very good at all next year. So you've got to renovate, you've got to maintain, you've got to work with that planting. You've got to control weeds, you've got to control insects and diseases, and that's usually more of a problem. However, you get several years production out of it. And then in a garden situation, that may be very well what you want. You want to get, you can get
maybe
5 to 8 years of production out of strawberries.
All right, that was explained pretty well. Thank you, Mr. D. All right, here's our next question. Is there a cure for rose rosette disease? And here's your quick answer: no. I've talked to Dr. Wyndham, our pathologist in Nashville. Look, they're conducting experiments now in Nashville. The deal is this: if you have rose rosette, it's of course the vector for that virus is the Areophile mite. Pull it up. You have to pull up.
Destroy it, pull up and destroy.
Get rid of it. So once they're conducting these experiments now, when they find out, they will definitely let us know. But if you have rose rosette, witch's broom is something you hear a lot of people say as well. Has a lot of thorns, has the green tint looking to the leaves. If you see that, pull it out.
Yeah, the witch's broom is just the Achilles heel of the knockout roses.
Yeah, just.
But the happiest day of my life was the day I dug up all my roses. I do have some knockout roses left, but I mean, the roses in this area are just a real challenge to keep growing successfully.
It'd be better if the roses would die. if they had a rosette, but
Yeah.
they don't. They just
Yeah,
hang
Yeah,
on.
they just hang
Look,
on.
And so they're a source of infection for others, and so it's very important to take them out.
All right.
And throw them away.
And throw them away. Double bag them, throw them away. All right, Andy, Mr. D, we're out of time.
Yeah.
Thank you. Remember, we love to hear from you. Send us a letter or an email with your gardening questions. Send your email to familyplot@wkno.org. The mailing address is Family Plot, 7151 Cherry Farms Road, Cordova, Tennessee, 38016. That's all we have time for today. Thanks for watching. I'm Chris Cooper. Be sure to join us next time for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. Be safe.
Production funding for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South is provided by Good Winds Landscape and Garden Center in Germantown since 1943 and continuing to offer its plants for successful gardening with 7 greenhouses and 3 acres of plants, plus comprehensive landscape services. International Paper Foundation, the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.